Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome to Sommelier. I'm Bria, your tastemaker for every little thing. And we're talking about whiskey today. And we're also reviewing Sir Davis, Beyonce's new whiskey, which, spoiler alert, actually pretty good. And I'm not a whiskey drinker. And also just give you some tips about tasting that I want to make sure I share with the world so that you can really fully appreciate how cool and awesome this particular whiskey is. And also just understand what whiskey is in the world writ large. So let's dive right in. First thing I want to kind of explain is what whiskey is. So whiskey is a grain-based spirit. So what does that mean? What are grains? I know this seems very basic, but walk with me. It's going to be really important when we talk about what's in here. So grains are things like wheat, barley, rye. These are all different types of grains that are out there in the world. So these grains are mixed often with other things like corn and water, and then they are distilled, meaning they are put in a still and the water is removed from them. And then you do different things to manipulate it. But basically, after you do those two things, you have a very, very basic whiskey. Now, for the purposes of understanding what is in here, you need to know that there are more than three, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to talk about three different types of whiskey. There's Scotch whiskey, aka Scotch. That is made in the country of Scotland. That's what Scotch is. They usually have like a smokier quality to their whiskey, but that's Scotch. It's a type of whiskey. I think they make it out of barley, which is a type of grain, as I mentioned earlier. Then there is, in the US, bourbon whiskey. So a bourbon whiskey means that it has to be made in the United States to be considered a bourbon, and it needs to be made of at least 51% corn. So in addition to that grain and water, 51% of what's in there has to be corn, and then it is distilled and turned into something else. And finally, there's Tennessee whiskey. Yes, like the song, Sweet Like Tennessee Whiskey. So all Tennessee whiskeys are types of bourbon, meaning they are US and they have at least 51% corn inside of them. Now, walk with me. The other thing about makes a Tennessee whiskey Tennessee, other than the fact that it's specifically in Tennessee, it has to be made specifically in the state of Tennessee, is that they are run through Tennessee sugar. They are filtered through Tennessee sugar. That's what gives it the sweetness. And then they are also filtered through maple charcoal, I believe it is, maple charcoal. So those are the three different types of whiskeys out there. And frankly, this is none of those things. First thing I always do whenever I'm trying to evaluate a bottle is I look at the back, and here you go. I'm going to do a little shot so you can see it. Hopefully this gets into focus. And then you can see kind of what the vibes are. So let's quickly read what's on the back here. So we've got Sir Davis rye whiskey finished in sherry cask. So as I talked about, rye is a type of grain. So it is a whiskey. It is like a true whiskey. It is a rye whiskey finished in sherry cask. So we're going to talk about sherry in another episode, but basically what you need to know, it's a type of fortified wine or a type of wine that has been aged multiple times in caskets. And it is... It's local to a region that I'm not remembering right now, but I will tell you in a future episode. So sherry cask is probably what gives it a lot of its smoothness of the flavor, because it is basically the rye whiskey that has been distilled is being, loved up upon by these sherry casks, which are taste like sherry, or like a super strong version of sherry if you've ever tried it. Anyway, something else you'll notice here at the back is that you see that it says distilled in Indiana, finished, blended, and bottled by Davis Ho Distilling Company in Houston, Texas. So once again, it's not a Tennessee whiskey, it wasn't made in Tennessee, and it's not a bourbon because it doesn't have 51% corn in it. It doesn't have corn in it at all from what I can determine. So that's really important to understand. So if you're going to go taste a bourbon, this is not going to taste like that. If you're going to taste a Tennessee whiskey and then taste this and expecting, it's not going to taste like that because they are made of completely different things. So important to note. So let's talk about tasting for a little bit. Some basics from tasting, no matter what you're tasting, that I think that you should do. So the first thing I always do is I read the tasting notes of whatever I'm drinking. You can go online and read the tasting notes. I've got my computer over here, so I'm going to quickly read to you the tasting notes of Sir Davis. The tasting notes are usually broken up into three different sections. These ones are no exceptions. Color, so what you physically see about the bottle, the color of whatever you're drinking, the aroma or the smell of what you're drinking, the taste and what you can expect for the taste to be like, and finally the finish, which is like what it tastes like after you finish swallowing the drink. For this particular whiskey, the color that they've described this as is deep copper. The aroma, tangy Seville oranges mingle with a soft sun-kissed raisins, while the sizzling spices of cloves, cinnamon, and ginger play with luxurious notes of demora, sugar, and toffee. All very fancy. I have a glass of it right here. I've been sipping on it for the last couple minutes. It's very good, but anyway, when I smell it, Or when you smell it, if you choose to buy this, you may not be able to recognize what you're smelling. You may not be able to recognize clove and cinnamon and ginger and all the other fancy things that are supposed to be smelling. Do not feel bad. It takes an incredibly trained tongue and an incredibly trained nose to be able to smell these things. But if you want to do it, what I recommend is go get some ginger or some clove or some cinnamon, smell that first, and then smell the whiskey. And then you'll be able to identify a lot more clearly the notes within the drink. So if you've never smelled cinnamon before or never tasted cinnamon before, to be able to recognize it, you have to be able to smell it or taste it. So please, I do recommend that you do that if you want to really understand and appreciate and have a little bit more sensitivity to what you're drinking. I'm not going to promise you that it's going to work, but I will say you will get a lot closer. Anyway, let's talk about the taste. That's the next thing. Rich and buttery toffee is followed by an array of spices with cinnamon, clove, and classic rye spice up front, followed by a soft malty and biscuity notes intertwined with a vibrant citrus top note. Again, same thing. You may not be able to taste all of those things, but know that they are in there. If you want to be able to taste them, again, just take the tasting notes and taste some of the things that they say are in here, and then taste this and see if you can find it over time. And eventually you do. I know I do personally. Every time I try it in this particular method, I taste and then I smell and then I taste, or I taste one thing and I taste the other, and then I'm slowly able to be a lot more attuned to what they're talking about. And finally, the finish, hits of honey are encountered with a soft, lingering finish reminiscent of plump sultanas and ripe cherries. To be able to taste these things, you have to have had a sultana, you have to have had a cherry that is ripe, and then you can be able to identify these tastes within your mouth a little bit better. Yeah. Anyway, all that being said, let's taste the thing. I tasted this a little bit earlier for my Instagram. I might play that same footage again because you clearly can't beat like that first reaction. But the TLDR is, this stuff is pretty good. I'm not a whiskey drinker. I'm not a huge fan of whiskeys, kind of point blank period. Never been my favorite drink, been usually a little bit too strong for my taste. But this is actually quite nice. I had it just straight up with a little bit of ice. I thought it was actually incredibly smooth. I thought it was incredibly nice to taste. I'm a really big fan. I'm gonna probably actually drink this and mix this with stuff. It reminds me a lot of Hennessy White, which is like a smoother, in my opinion, version of Hennessy Pure. They're both very strong. Like, don't get me wrong, this is not drinking juice or anything to the sort, but it's drinkable, it's smooth, it's soft, but it also still tastes like that little bit of bite that you get from a nice whiskey. And all in all, I really like it. I think it's worth tasting, and you guys should give it a shot. Please let me know what you think about it though. That is for the most part what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to make sure everyone in the world knew what whiskey was, what it's made of, and what makes this one particularly unique. And if you are interested in whiskey, some whiskeys I've tried that I really like, let's start with like a whiskey with an incredible story. If you don't know it, please check it out. It is Uncle Nearest whiskey. I'm a huge fan of their whiskey. I love the story. The whiskey itself is pretty good. I order it whenever I need to drink whiskey at the bar or something. I think it's a really reputable, good whiskey if you are a person that likes to drink whiskey. And then there's also Maker's Mark, which is kind of the Casamigos of whiskey. It's very popular. I think it's fine if you're gonna drink whiskey, drink that. But frankly, if I had to recommend whiskeys, I would recommend this one, and I would recommend Uncle Nearest, which is a little bit of a stronger take on whiskey. But this is frankly super approachable, pretty delicious. It probably makes a really excellent mixed drink. I can maybe make some drinks and let y'all know. But all in all, I'm super impressed. I like this a lot. I think you should taste it too. I love you, Beyonce. You did, listen, what did they say? What did Michelle Obama say?
Hey, Queen. Girl, you have done it again. Constantly raising the bar for us all and doing it flawlessly.
What Michelle Obama said, once again, raising the bar, okay? This stuff is really good. So that's all I got. Please like and subscribe to Sommelier for more content just like this. We're not just gonna talk about whiskey, we're gonna talk about tequila, and we're gonna talk about champagne. But I saw this came out just a couple of days ago, and I had to give it a try and give you guys my thoughts before it goes out to the market in a few days. Anyway, I love you all. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you later. Bye.